Good morning. Great to see all of you out this morning, and hopefully everyone had a good 4th of July holiday. I know for me, I was up a little bit longer than I had desired, but you know, you can never have too much fun with your kids, right? So we made some things go boom and squeal, and then I baptized them really quickly, and then I got to bed as soon as I could. So we'll just see how I do this morning. You might be in for a short sermon. I can't promise the Bible class. In our books, we'll be on page 28. And if you're following along in your Bibles, we will be starting out in Ephesians chapter 6. What I owe my parents. Now, we don't need any parent and parental figures in here getting too big of a head. We all need to remain humble. What do we owe our parents? In Ephesians 6, 1 and 2, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And it almost seems like, you know, again, I try not to do too much of a broad generalization, but, you know, just in passing, in discussion, it seems like so many people struggle to do what is right. It's almost like their game in life, their rule in life is to find rules to break them, right? To figure out ways to shortcut, if you will, or to just, again, not do what is right. People, there's a lot of people, we need to give them credit where credit's due. A lot of people know what the right thing it is to do. And see, what is it that James tells us? For him who knows the right thing to do, and for him to not do it, for him it is what? Sin. There's a lot of people, and they'll try to play dumb, right? You ever had those discussions and those interactions, and it's like, don't play dumb with me. And you know, it's like I tell my children, it's like I can handle the truth. And it's especially easy with our children because we know them, right? We know their facial expressions, we know all of their movements, and we know when they get uncomfortable. It's a little more difficult with strangers because you don't know all of their ins and outs, if you will. But even so, with some folks, you can just tell. Some people just get really uncomfortable real quick, and it's like, okay, let's try to shine a little bit more light and reveal and investigate a little further. But again, for him who knows the right thing to do and for him to not do it, for him it is sin. And so we're just talking about the right thing in all areas, in all walks of life, but especially with our parents. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. That's also like a precursor. That's defining the terms, if you will. This is the terms and conditions, because sometimes people just go off, and we have to be careful with extremes, right? Extremism, no matter where you are in life, is never really satisfactory, because extremisms, again, it just kind of goes along with the name. You're going to an extreme, and so you might be forgetting about other realities. And so I think about, like when Jesus was talking about to those Pharisees when he was saying that, you know, you strain out the gnat, but you swallow a camel. That's the danger of extremes, you see. You'll strain out the gnat to keep from swallowing a gnat, but you're going to, in a sense, in turn, the very next minute, you're willing to swallow the camel. So that's the problems with extremism. So obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. I had to remind a few of my children yesterday, last night in particular, I brought you into this world and I can take you out. And so I think there's a little, but there's a little bit of wisdom in this. Our culture today is a lot more docile. While we do have wars and we do have conflicts, it was a lot more prevalent in their day and age to just, when someone upsets you, to just go off and get rid of them and just move on to your next victim. And so, but the preacher humor is just this. If you don't honor your father and your mother, they will make sure you disappear. That's just a little bit of humor, but not trying to take it too seriously here. But I want you to think about our culture for the moment, and what is it that's beginning to become so prevalent is people talk about rights. I want you to think about that. Do we have rights here in this country? Absolutely, right? We have the rights to do just about anything we want within reason. But even as children, there are people and there are even institutions that try to encourage this idea, but they're 15 going on what? 15 going on what? Like I even think about my oldest son Logan, he's 17 going on 18, great, okay. And so Lord willing, when he turns 18, guess what? He's still my son, he's still my child. I don't care if you are a legalized adult or not, especially if you're living under my roof. Think about it. So just because he'll become of legal age, great, you can go buy cigarettes, okay. I mean, you're not going to smoke around me. And you're not going to smoke in the house. That's right. Right. So rights doesn't remove responsibility. And look, I'm not trying to just throw young people under the bus. There's adults who don't understand this. There are grown people, like it was a week and a half ago. I was parked in front of Goodwill because Sarah wanted to go to Goodwill. And I'm just like, okay, and I'd just rather sit in the car. I didn't feel like walking around Goodwill that day. So I'm sitting there, and the guy kind of walks up, and he's, about 6 foot away from my driver's side door, and he's like, and I turned and looked at him, and I recognized him. Now, I couldn't remember his name, but I recognized him because I used to work for the sheriff's department and stuff, so he reminded me of a guy that was on one of my clean teams. And so I rolled down the window and I said, "What's your name?" And he told me his name, and he was like, "Can I use your phone?" And I'm like, "For what?" I mean, I wasn't born yesterday. Now, he doesn't recognize me because I'm a lot older and I'm more fat and I'm uglier now than I was back then. So he doesn't recognize me. He's like, I need to get a ride. For what? I mean, when I pulled up, you were just sitting here in the corner in the shade. What do you need a ride for? And, and so I'm like, okay, we'll go down this route. I said, I'll put my phone on speakerphone and I'll dial the number and you can speak. And as soon as I figured what he was doing. He was trying to get another drug. Because as soon as he was like, I need he said dime, I immediately hung up the phone. I said, nope, see ya, bye. And this dude is like 42, 43 years old, been in and out of jail constantly ever since. I'm sure he was in jail as a juvenile. I can't speak to that. He's a little bit older than me. But I told him after I said, you don't remember me, but I used to be a deputy on clean team. Said my last name was Elkins, and then his eyes got this big around. Because then he remembered me then. I said, how are you going to sit here and tell me that you were going to call for a ride, and then you're asking for a dime bag. I said, I don't even care a dime for what. I said, you're not getting my phone number hung up in all this mess. And of course, he starts trying to justify himself. I said, look, if you truly need something, I'll help you out. But when it comes, I said, you know better. You can tell he's homeless. He doesn't have a place to stay regularly, just the way he's not clean, he's not taken care of, he's not kept up. And I'm not talking about like being kept up in a suit, but just you can tell he's just homeless. And that's an unfortunate state to be in, but the reality is it's because of these choices that he's making and what he keeps buying and paying for. And I just told him, no, we're not going to. And you should have known that I was going to shut this down. You should have known. Because I questioned you on what you're calling for and what you're requesting, what you're asking for. And the moment you deviated from it, that ended it. We're not going down that route. But people want to talk about, well, it's my right. Yes, you have the right to be dumb. But that doesn't mean you get to terrorize people. And it certainly doesn't mean that you should be destroying your life with terrible decisions. Just because you have the right and the freedom to go and do something doesn't mean you ought to do it. Just because I have the right to say something doesn't mean it might be the right thing to say. So we can talk about rights all day long, but let's talk about responsibilities. Things that we should be doing each and every day. Am I glorifying God in my life through my choices, through my decisions? Am I perfect? No. Could I have probably been a little more gentle with that guy? Yeah, sure, I'll give you that. I probably could have been a little nicer. But the fact is when you're dealing with substance abuse, you can't coddle substance abuse. You cannot. I've got too many years of dealing with substance abuse to there's no way, you can't just say, okay, poor little Johnny, it's going to be okay. You can't do that. You've got to get them to wake up and recognize that they are destroying their lives. And so I wasn't going to coddle him that day. And sometimes, even with our children, we coddle our children instead of giving them reality. Now, I'm not saying necessarily there's anybody in here that does that specifically, but sometimes in order to get our children to see the light, I'm not saying you knock the daylights out of them, but you go to whatever's necessary, and you're like, son, you've got to wake up, because the world doesn't care. I want you to think about it from that perspective. The world does not care. Your job does not care. They might care for about a day, but guess what? Human resources are going to be going out basically day over the next day, and they're going to find your replacement, and they're going to move on. And who's left reeling at that point? Not them. Not your neighbors. I mean, yeah, sure, your neighbors might be sad for a little bit, but they're going to move on too. The world does not care. And so, I think about myself, and even in my circumstance, and I think about what I'm responsible for and what I need to do in my life. And obviously we're going to talk about this today and then even Wednesday. But look at days 1 through 5. Just look at the titles here. You've got accepting the role of your parents. And so understanding our purpose regarding our relationship between us and our parents. Now some of you are of the age where your parents are gone. And so you're kind of in that stage of where you perhaps have children that remains. But then look at day 2, a listening ear. And I think we've all been there and done this where we felt at a certain age where I've got this figured out. Right? And so we got to think about that. We need to think about the wisdom and the experience that folks have because of their age and because of what they've gone through. But then obviously day 3, obey your parents. That's a biggie. Honor your parents, day 4. And care. To take care of our parents when they are old, day 5. And so these are all things that we're going to be talking about today and on Wednesday as we study this. What do we owe our parents? Love. So think about 1 Corinthians 13, starting in around verse 4 and going through verse 8. We owe them love. Exhibiting the fruits of the Spirit in our lives. So Galatians chapter 5, starting in around verse 22. Living those things out towards them because, look, they raised you. They took care of you. They fed you. They clothed you. They nurtured you. When you had a wound, they bandaged that wound, or at least we hope, right? But for the most part, the folks around the room, we're all alive, we're breathing, we're well, so your parents did something. Were they perfect? No. But were you perfect as a child? Of course. If we're only listening to your side of the story, but understand how God's creation works. Now, I know that there's people out there that believe that, poof, we just kind of came into existence on a whim. No rhyme, no reason. But the reality is when you look at the truth and the realities of creation, it's like, okay, there's a lot more to it than just some gaseous belch that occurred and an atom split and then boom, we have all this life and order. That's too easy. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have enough faith for that. There's too much order and for all of this to just come from chaos without something manipulating that chaos into order. But understand how man came to be. Obviously, God created Adam and then caused man to fall asleep. Man goes into deep sleep, takes rib out of Adam, creates woman, and then he says, go and multiply, right? And so what does first child come into? Comes into a family unit. Are they by themselves? No. They've got a mother and a father, right? And so the first instinct as they are growing up is this family unit that's together. Not isolation, not to be isolated away from everybody, but within God's purpose, within His creation, God placed children with a family. With a mother and a father. And so this is not an accident, as people tend to think that happens through life, that just everything is by accident, by chance. God created mankind and designed the family unit from the very beginning. And so we have this within ourselves because child has mother and father. We are raised with the sense of desiring relationships with others, to be accepted, not rejected. Most people hate the idea of rejection. We're not talking about the few percentage of those who are suffering from legitimate problems such as antisocial or asocial disorders. That's not what I'm referring to. But most of us, within us, it's like ingrained within our DNA to be creatures and people of people. To be people that desires acceptance, that desires to talk and interact with other people, to engage us. Because that's how we're brought up. Most mothers and fathers don't just have babies and then just put them in the crib and hope that they grow up. They're interacting with them. They're feeding them. They're clothing them. They're sheltering. They're teaching them things, right? And so there's a sense of value that obviously starts with God, because God valued His creation. And when He got through creating everything, He said that it was all good. But parents continue instilling value in their children. And so as this value grows, and so you have confidence building within the child, and as they grow and grow and grow and become old and move out, and then eventually, guess what? You as a parent, you get old too. And you get to where perhaps you can't do for yourself as you once had been able to do. All of that work and time and effort, now it's their time to shine. It's their time to come back. It's kind of like a circle of life, if you will. And so now the child comes and helps take care of the parent in their final days, in their final hours, however you want to describe it. But so many children now want to talk about how horrible their lives were. And so I want to be careful, because I don't want to appear as if to say that someone in here did not have a hard childhood. I don't deny the reality that there are people who did have poor, terrible childhood. So I don't want to dismiss that. But there are those who try to come in and they try to excuse themselves from their responsibilities. And they look at the idea that, well, my parents didn't get me this. They didn't send me to camp. They didn't sign me up for all of the social activities that I wanted to do. They didn't buy me a four-wheeler or a UTV, whatever it is that you wanted. And so your childhood was so horrible because they didn't do those other things that you wanted them to do. But did they instill within you good godly principles? For a lot of kids, kids are shallow, so we have to also consider the source. They don't think about a lot of that stuff. But they think about all the imperfections of their parents. And because of those imperfections, they're like, you know what? That's where the disrespect for authority really begins. Not because authority wasn't taught in the home. There's some kids that's brought up in homes that, their parents were faithful, godly people. They didn't abuse their children. They didn't just, outright beat them or try to kill them. But they tried to teach them about authority, respecting authority. So respecting them as parents, respecting others, saying, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and, the like. Respecting your teachers, respecting your employers. And you ever notice that sometimes people get it backwards, even within husband-wife relationships? Like, let me use that one for example. A wife will go out and she will respect her boss more than she respects her husband. That's backwards. The same is true for children. we'll go out and we will respect our bosses and others more than we'll respect our parents. And of course, we always have a reason, right? Did I say it was a good reason? No, but we always have our reason. We have a reason for everything. My reason's good. Yours is not.
Is it a reason or is it an excuse?
Well, we know it's an excuse. We know that. But to the eyes of someone who's selfish, who's self-centered, they're not going to see that. Everybody else is wrong. And when everybody else in the room is wrong, you just need to listen to me. Lack of respect for the government, lack of respect for laws, rules. Again, as I said earlier at the beginning of class, some people, they see rules and they're like, I'm going to find a way to break that rule. That is their lot in life. But accepting that the reality that God has given parents authorization. They've given them authority to lead, to rule, to oversee, to raise, and to teach. If kids don't see that and they don't respect that and they don't see it in the home, now obviously it has to also be exemplified in the home. So as fathers, we have to teach and show our children that we submit to authority too. Do we submit to God? A lot of times the answer is no. So of course that's going to trickle down to the children. So, well, you don't submit to God, so I don't need to submit to God. And then they'll eventually take it far enough. I don't have to submit to you. You see the problem? A lot of it starts with us. God establishes authority in all walks of life. Jesus says the only way to get to God is through who? It's through Him. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. Jesus was given all power, all authority in heaven and on earth. So we can't sit here, when people poo-poo the idea of authority, it's like you're really getting away from a very centralized truth that's in our lives, and that there's authority everywhere. And if we're not willing to submit to that authority, it's going to have a major domino effect. You ever lined up dominoes so pretty, and then someone who thinks they're funny, they come over and they knock over one domino? What happens to the rest of them? They all fall down. That's the danger of getting away from God's purpose in our lives. So there's many authorities. There's obviously parents, number one. Well, actually, we'll say God, number one. Then parents. And then the rest of them aren't in any particular order, but you've got teachers and employers and government, church leadership. So, again, once you knock over one domino, it becomes really easy to knock over the next and the next. And it just keeps going and going. I don't have to submit to anything. I'm spiritual, not religious. That's the direction so many people are going. When people say, I don't need the church, it's like, excuse me? Do you know what the church is? When people say, I don't need the church, it's almost like, okay, well, the next time you fall and you break your femur, you don't need to go to the hospital. Well, that's different. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because that's an excuse. But when people say that they don't need the church, it's like, okay, well then you're not a part of the church. Well, then you've really offended them. Oh, well, how can you say that? How can you say I'm not part of the church? If you don't view the body of the Lord as important, what did you do at the watery grave of baptism? What did you do? You put Christ on in baptism, and what did Christ do for you? He added you to where? The church, His body. And here's the reality. The people that's spewing this garbage, they're just wrong. And there are people that's too afraid of conflict. They'd rather be conflict avoidant. Well, you know, we don't want to have any controversy around here. We don't want to offend anybody. I'm not out to try to find someone to offend. But when you're spewing out stupidity, and you're saying, well, I'm spiritual, not religious. I don't need the church. I don't need to go to assembly. It's like, okay, we're not sugarcoating this. We were told to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We weren't told to be sugar. Yes, Bill.
We need to know that the people are the church, not the building.
That's right. That's right. So the sense of community. We need that community. Now, can I also suggest a very real reality? There is a thing that's called church hurt, right? Y'all have heard about that? It's frustrating, isn't it? But the folks who's gone through church hurt, I'm not rationalizing it, I'm not justifying it, but I'm trying to kind of get you to open your eyes and see where was their faith? Was their faith in the people or was their faith in the Lord? Their faith was in the people.
Have their faith in the people, because you can ask them, about coming to church. They'll tell you all of this,
Yeah. Well, yeah, but
they are looking at the people instead of thinking about the Lord.
right. And then, could you imagine the amount of work that could be done and accomplished if those people would redirect their faith and say, you know what? That other person's struggling. I need to help them. But instead, they've made it about themselves. Well, they hurt me. And so everybody else can pound sand. You see? It's just a terrible disposition to have, especially about God's people. I'm not a fan when people begin to disparage the church and they begin to speak in such broad generalizations about God's people. Are there sinners here in this room today? Yes. And I'm one of them. And so if that bothers you and you're not willing to help me in my faith, the problem doesn't lie with me. It certainly doesn't lie with the Lord. It doesn't lie with the person that sits across the pew from you. The problem is you. Sometimes we just need to dig down and we need to remember the class we had last week when I was talking about reflections and how we need to look in the mirror, but so many of us, we're just willing to show the mirror to somebody else. We need to look in the mirror. And so understanding our purpose that God has for us regarding obedience to our parents, let's bring this back to what I'm supposed to be talking about. Obedience to parents is obedience to God. It all interconnects with God. And so rejecting parental instruction simply because we don't like it, simply because we don't agree with it. I'm not talking about things that would be sinful. I'm just talking about subjective things, things that, well, I don't agree with them. I'd prefer green walls instead of blue walls. I mean, there's people out there that are shallow enough, they've gone no contact with their parents, not because of a sin issue or a safety issue. They do it because they can't agree about the drapes in their house. And I know you might think that that's an extreme example, but people are shallow. But when we disobey our parents, we are disobeying God. Jesus himself submitted to his earthly parents. Remember the story when he was 12, they went to Jerusalem and they're in the temple and they do all the stuff, and then the family, they leave, the caravan leaves, and they're what, 2 days journey, 3 days journey? And they look around, they're like, what? Where's Jesus? And how old is he? He's 12. Okay? And when they go back, they see him in the temple interacting with the leaders, asking questions. Now, he does say, well, don't you know I have to be about my Father's business? But then what does he do? He leaves with them. They said, son, I'm paraphrasing, trying to do this from a story perspective. Okay, but it's time to go home. And guess what? He went with them. He left. This is Jesus, the Son of God. If anyone had the right to thwart parental rights and responsibilities and say, I don't have to listen to you, it would have been him. But Jesus goes and he obeys. And I go back, and family life in the home, our home lives, sometimes gets the lines between homes and church and even other ideas or institutions, whether it's work or nonprofit, whatever. Sometimes those lines get blurred because some things can overlap, like we teach in the home, but we also teach in the church, so that's an overlapping, right? Now, I might get a wild answer here because we do have quite a few old school folks here. So we discipline in the home, we spank in the home, but does the church spank? So you see how those duties don't always overlap in that sense, right? Do we see that? And so what I'm trying to get you to see is that home life prepares us for everything. And if you're not teachable at home, you're not going to be teachable here in the church. And if you're not teachable at home, you're not teachable in the church, you're not going to be teachable in the workplace. You're not going to be teachable anywhere. That's kind of the direction that I'm trying to go and get you to see. So at home, we teach about respect. We teach about responsibility and patience and service and self-control and submission. We teach about all those things here too. We reinforce those realities. Because these qualities are necessary. Because then we're going to produce godly adults if they learn submission. Now, part of their learning is what they are observing and seeing. Are they observing and seeing respect, self-control, patience, kindness, goodness? I'm not saying, are they seeing perfection? Again, there's no doubt. There's no question. I'm not making the argument that somehow they need to see perfection. The only way they're going to see perfection is seeing Jesus. But are they seeing you do the right thing? Mark?
Yeah,
Right.
But still, there was a spirit back then that it wasn't just your parents that would correct you.
Sure.
And I mean, the what they call the Urshers.
Nurseries.
Urshers would, you out of order. Your parents may not be, you back there in the class or whatever. Those people would put you in place. Back when I was in school,
Sure.
those teachers put you in place.
Oh, yeah.
And our society today have gone so far away from that oneness and teaching our children
Yeah.
that now I I know a lady who was at Walmart snatched a little teenager girl and tried to get her right, just shook her a little bit.
Yeah.
Somebody called the police, and she said it took her 5 years and over $7,000 to get her child back.
Yep.
So it's the kind of society we live in today. That oneness, if you're a Christian, you're obligated to God to carry out his ordinance for us in raising our children.
Right.
It teaches, and of course it's an old cliche, it takes a village to raise a child. That's still prevalent today. I don't have a problem with an adult correcting my child, my grandchild.
Mm-hmm.
But in society today, these adults are so far away from the truth, and they abuse children that, it just makes it hard for a society of non-believers to understand that principle
Yeah.
of having the whole village to raise a child. It's scary out there. I love kids. I love kids. I see folks in the grocery store and they have their kids and I just play with them and all that kind of stuff.
You hand suckers out there too?
Well, they won't let them take them. But there was this one little kid. I think I mentioned this before. That was on this buggy, and there was this black guy passing by. He said, "I love you," and I mean that stopped almost the whole. Everybody stopped and smiled at that. The little kid, innocent, just looked at another guy and said, "I love you."
Mm-hmm.
And you should have seen the number of people going up to that buggy. And so we got a real responsibility out there, and as Christians, as the church, we're the light.
Yeah.
Not, like you said earlier, we're all the sinners of it.
Yeah.
And so we have to be, on our best.
That's right. And see, I think when it comes to I don't call it an old cliche because I still hear people say it all the time. It takes a village. People want the benefits of the village without the responsibility of the village. And that's the direction. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you're saying. That's just the direction so many people go, and that's kind of like last week's sermon. People want a Savior, but they don't want a Lord. It goes back to submission. They won't submit. They refuse to submit. I think I am being told that we are out of time. So we will have to pick up here on Wednesday, and at this time we'll go into a break.